Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Woolfolk again. Woolfolk the other way at the 30, the 40. Woolfolk to midfield. Miles Woolfolk with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, one fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the Canes for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6.
Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right.
Throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag.
Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart.
Now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. May has thrown it lucky through the left hand. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Nard fields it at the 26. Heading in with Barshot. Theo at the 35. Theo, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Theo, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always, coming at you late on a Friday evening. It feels like a Thursday. It feels like there's another day of work that still is to come. We will have to juggle that tomorrow with the college football slate that is still on the horizon. And again, we're so used to recording on Thursday nights that, I thought it was a Thursday, but here we are on a Friday. The work week has come to an end for many of you guys, and now we're here to talk a little Carolina football. We got to talk about 3 departures from the program, unfortunately, that happened within the last 2 weeks. How important are those departures? We'll tell you about that. And then we do have to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly from the first 4 games of the Tar Heel season. You may be asking, how in the world did you come up with any good from those first 4 games of the season? Well, we did. We came up with 3 in each category, even though the ugly, you could have put most of the entire football team in that category. But we'll go through that here to sort of give you something here on the bye week before we get you ready, of course, for Carolina versus Clemson. So, but let's start with the guys that did end up leaving the program. These guys not officially in the transfer portal as of yet. I don't know if any of these guys are officially entering the transfer portal. We've already seen some guys from, Florida State, or not Florida State. They're on right now. That's what threw me off. From Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, some of those guys have already entered the transfer portal. These are 3 guys that just left the program. They just stepped away in the middle of the season. Now, it shouldn't be too shocking considering what game we are at in the season. Carolina's already played their 4th game of the season, getting ready to play their 5th. This is typically the time when you're going to see guys step away, especially when you got a bye week here. But you do end up losing Isaiah Johnson, a slot wide receiver, Isaiah Johnson, excuse me. I forgot that Jones had the correct pronunciation online for him. And he's a guy that left the program before Carolina even played Central Florida. So he was only with the program for 3 games, only saw action in 1 of those games. So he's a guy that's going to be eligible for a redshirt year. I believe he was already a redshirt wide receiver. So certainly a guy that I think he was a redshirt sophomore. And so he's going to be a guy that's going to be looking for another year of extra eligibility here after sitting out the majority of the season for Carolina. Meanwhile, offensive tackle Trevion Green also entering the transfer portal for Carolina, and wide receiver Paul Billups II has also put his name has also left the program. Again, none of those guys, I think I said with Travion Green, he entered his name to the portal. None of those guys have yet entered their name into the portal just yet. But these are three guys that have stepped away from the program. It feels like there are some people that are starting to get a little bit concerned about these. Just, on the surface, your thoughts on losing three players, from the team in the middle of the season. I think the main question that many people are asking is this a bad look for Bill Belichick and the staff?
Yeah, when you look at the snap count, I think it was Jacob Turner or Michael Coe tweeted out their snap count. There's nothing significant here. I mean, obviously, Travion Green's a guy we pleaded to see more after the way we saw some of the offensive linemen play the first game and a half or so of the season. But nonetheless, throughout the early part of the year, they didn't play a whole lot. I think what you've got to figure out is this because, this is the new era of college football where this happens, where once you get to that fourth game, you get to a bye week, you see guys that kind of either step away. Most of the time, they enter their names into the portal and start trying to find their next football home. But that has not been the case so far with these three guys. Or is this a byproduct of maybe the dysfunction that is going on within the football program that maybe we haven't seen yet, but will maybe start to come to light as this season does progress? I think that's what you've got to figure out and hope that that's not what it is. Hopefully this is just three guys that have realized, hey, they're not going to be difference makers here. If they want to continue playing college football, they've got to go somewhere else as opposed to playing for Bill Belichick. And it's not the latter. I find it hard to believe with the latest reports we saw coming out this week. We see our head coach on the front cover of a magazine. You've got the reports about the hiring process. This could be the beginning of maybe a large exit of guys that were maybe thinking the same things that a lot of Carolina fans were thinking was once you got into football season, maybe the clown show, maybe the circus was going to come to a stop and it would just be all about football. That hasn't been the case because every time he turns around, you see his girlfriend on the sidelines and in places you don't typically see the head football coach's significant other, before or after a football game. So, on the surface, their impact, no, you're not missing a whole lot, but this could be, the first real telltale sign that, this thing has already gone off the rails in Belichick's first 4 games in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I think that's an overreaction for sure. I mean, when you're looking at the guys that Carolina lost, they played a combined 21 snaps in the first 4 games of the season. Paul Billups did not see the field. Travion Green played 16 snaps, and then 5 snaps played by Isaiah Johnson before he entered the transfer portal. Johnson, it's very clear that it was playing time. He had a family member that was commenting on all of the posts about him leaving the program, and he was basically saying, well, this is what happens when you don't end up playing guys a significant amount like we were promised we were going to be. I don't know if those promises were actually made. Based off of what we saw from Isaiah Johnson, it's not a big loss. There's not anything significant that he brought to the table, so I'm not necessarily concerned about losing him. Travion Green is probably the most significant loss that you suffer, but here's the thing. How much was he going to play at left tackle? We saw him get some opportunities there, but ultimately it looked like he had been passed over on the depth chart by Aiden Buchanan. It looked like William Boone was ahead of him on the depth chart as well whenever he's healthy. Not sure what the status is of William Boone at this time. We're just going to have to wait and see when those injury reports come out as to whether or not he is a guy that is available but just isn't being used. And then remember that you have the return of Austin Blasky, and they're basically saying we're going to plug him in at the spot that we feel like is the weakest along this offensive line. They believe that the left tackle spot is the weakest spot at this point, and so they have plugged him in there at that left tackle spot. That means that Travion Green was not going to get a lot of playing time. So I think it makes sense why he enters the portal as well. That's not shocking to me at all. And I don't think he's really that big of a loss for Carolina, especially if Aiden Buchanan had passed over him on the depth chart and is showing the staff what he needs to show them to be able to play in certain moments if Austin Blaske was to get banged up again. And then Paul Billups, Paul Billups was a guy that I really thought would have had an opportunity to succeed at Carolina if it wasn't for some of the injury issues that he suffered. Often injured guy. That is certainly part of the reason why he is, potentially mulling a medical retirement. I think that is certainly on the table for him based off of some of the reports, and that makes a lot of sense. So we'll see ultimately what ends up happening. I don't think that this is a significant blow for Carolina, but you never know. I mean, you brought up, and I guess you are more concerned with the article that's coming out in Us Weekly than I think I am. For me, there's really nothing that you can do about that being released at this time of the year. This is what happens when you do this kind of stuff in the offseason. They can release this anytime they want to, and they waited until an advantageous time for them. Carolina's struggling. They felt like this was the perfect time to go ahead and release that. In that article, there are not comments from Bill Belichick. There are not comments from Jordan Hudson. So even she did not have control over this. But, I mean, yeah, you got the stuff with her on the sidelines. Maybe there are guys that are looking at that and saying, hey, I thought this circus was going to be over. It's not, but I don't know if that really is going to affect a lot of these guys, especially guys that are starters from entering the transfer portal. I don't see that happening. I don't see there being an influx of guys going to the transfer portal, but maybe you feel differently about that than I do.
No, I mean, I think it's just all of the outside noise that I think I was hopeful of once you got into football season would maybe just go away and it would be about football, and maybe it is. But and I think we spend a lot more time talking about optics because we talk about optics a lot in our radio job and how it looks and everything. It's just not a good look that when your head football coach is walking off the field for getting his butt kicked, there's his 24-year-old girlfriend who doesn't really she's got to read the room. Like Bill Belichick, I'm not trying to be blunt. He should not want to see the last thing on his mind should be his girlfriend after what happened on the football field. Like, we're paying you $10 million to win football games. And you're 2-2 and you've been non-competitive in the 2 losses that you've had. And then, no, you can't help that the article comes out after what happened. But why I harken back to what we talked about a lot in the spring. It's why you don't want your head coach doing that stuff to begin with, because there's just nothing to gain by it. Unless you're 4-0, like Greg Ward said here on our Facebook feed, if it were 4-0, wouldn't be a big deal. But the fact of the matter is you're not 4-0. The fact of the matter is that you're 2-2, and in your 2 losses against Big 12 competition, you've been outscored by nearly 60 points. That's just the fact of the matter. And so I hate it. Like, I hate being the one that's overtly a lot more critical, because I was a much bigger fan of the hire and much more believer of the hire than you were. But, this is part of what was just kind of entailed once he got hired, and once he pretty much gave her the power that he gave her without her being a member of the football staff. So do I think it's relating to these 3 guys entering the portal or leaving the program? No, I don't. And I'm not going to overreact to, those guys played 21 snaps. What you're hoping is that you're hoping this isn't the first of many. And you hope these are just 3 guys that have recognized they're not going to be a difference maker. And they're going to go ahead and leave now while they can. You hate for a guy like Paul Billups who may have to medically retire, because I think you saw there were glimpses of talent that maybe existed in him, just never got to work its way out onto the football field. So, it's just a weird time right now for Carolina football, because we don't really know what we got in Bill Belichick. We don't really know what we got in this all-in move that we were all excited about, 10 months ago. So hopefully this is nothing. Hopefully this is something that we're not talking about moving forward. But, I mean, I would just turn it around on you. Like, would you be surprised if this is the first of many exits from the program? Because I think with the way that he's just ran things, if more guys decided to leave, I would not be surprised because of the way they've handled their rotations and the way they divvied up the snaps. A whole lot of what they've done hasn't made a whole lot of sense to those of us on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if there was a max exodus. I would be stunned if mid-season you see a lot of guys leave, because I do think that they are still in an evaluation period where really anybody can step up. This is a team that, you know, when you have been beaten the way that they have by two power conference opponents, there are going to be opportunities to play because the guys that are playing are not good enough. That's just the matter of fact truth. So I think that there are going to be opportunities for these guys if they stick around. It's still a power conference program. It's still a chance for Bill Belichick to succeed. And I believe a lot of the guys, especially at this time, are probably still on board with the hire. And I believe they still think that it's going to work. They just think that it's off to a slow start, that, you know, some things haven't necessarily broken their way. I mean, we're going to have to find out. You know, there are some people that I think, you know, this week, and one of the things that I kind of wonder too is, you know, what does Central Florida look like the rest of the season? Was that maybe a game where Central Florida came out motivated to win a game for Sean Clark? You know, that was something we probably didn't talk enough about on Monday night when we talked about the passing of Sean Clark, the unfortunate passing of him, was that seemed to be something that maybe lit a fire underneath that Central Florida team. Now, there's no excuse for Carolina being blown out, but I'm saying I think that could be part of the reason. That could be, you know, the mindset that some of these people around the program are taking. And that's why I don't think there's going to be a max exodus that you're going to have to worry about in season. I want to make it clear that I think the Us Weekly thing is incredibly embarrassing for the program. But do I think that there are going to be guys that are going to look at that and say, that's the reason that we're leaving the program? No, because that's just an extension of what happened in the offseason. That's what came with the hire of Bill Belichick and the fact that he is with the 24-year-old at this point who is wanting to control a lot of different things. And that was during the time where I think she had a lot more say. I think now you see that she's a little more hands-off. Now, again, you know, I've heard the audio from John Gruden. Certainly not a guy that I think is the greatest human being on planet Earth by any stretch of the imagination. But being a guy that is a, you know, former coach, I do think that him saying that Jordan Hudson being on the sideline is very weird is certainly something to take into account. Now, again, I don't know if the players really look at that and think anything of that. I think they're more focused on what's going on the field, and they probably don't think it's nearly as weird as we probably do. But I do think that it certainly is something that, you know, in the offseason, I don't know if they will address it or what's going to happen, but it certainly is a weird look to see her on the sidelines before games, and especially to see her, you know, after games where it doesn't really appear like she cares, and it really makes you question whether or not Bill Belichick cares about the results that are going on. I mean, I'm not in the full conspiracy theory. I mean, we had a conspiracy theory on air earlier this week from our guy T-Bone, who is a part of the Mac and Bone morning show. He said that he believes that this was all something that was concocted by Jordan Hudson, was for Bill Belichick to coach at the college level to help her image. That is something that could be. I don't see that being the truth. I think that Bill Belichick wanted this job once he realized that he couldn't get an NFL job. I think he's trying to prove that he still has it. And Carolina was the place that he wants to experiment at. I think Carolina wanted to put a lot of money into the program, and that was a way for them to get behind it. But, you know, I don't know if that's along the lines that you're believing. I don't think that is even remotely in question at this point. I do think Bill Belichick still wanted to coach. It's just maybe that right now, you know, this is, you know, a situation where you have to wonder how much care does he have at this point in his life?
Yeah, I think he still wants to coach because I think he loves football, and I think he wants to impact lives like coaches do. Do I think he's as driven as I thought he was going to be when he got hired? No. I do not think it Do I think it bothers him when that they're 2-2? I think he's upset. I think he's been embarrassed by how bad that it's looked. Do I think that it's driving him to be at the facility 20 hours a day like your head coach needs to be competitive? No, I don't. But I cannot prove otherwise. So I think, and I hate we got to go back to him again, but I think this comment from Greg Ward is spot on. He said, honestly, I think we all know how this Clemson game goes. If we look unprepared after 2 weeks and no energy in players from the coaches look uninterested, it's a wrap. I do think like that's very much on the table. Like for as much as the culture needed to be overhauled, I don't think he's overhauled the culture in a way that's substantial from what you thought you were getting over Mack Brown. There hasn't been that clear upgrade over Mack Brown that you were banking on. You got rid of Mack Brown and went and hired a guy that was just 1 year younger than him and gave him all the money and the resources you refused to give Mack Brown. And there hasn't been a clear change and there hasn't been a clear upgrade with what we've seen on the football field. And that's frustrating as Carolina fans that, I think, we're as much as anybody that work in the Tar Heel community want them to be good at football and are starved to be good at football. And when you hire a guy that's got 8 Super Bowl rings, you think that's going to happen. And maybe it still is, but through 4 games, it hasn't taken hold the way that we thought it was going to take hold. But I do think the bye week came at the right time. And if Bill Belichick is still worth his salt, if this staff is worth the price of admission, I think it's fair to expect a better looking product next Saturday in Kenan Stadium. They don't have to win that game, but by God, you got to be competitive because I do not think we expected Carolina to be 2-2 and look as not competitive as they have against Power 4 competition.
No, nobody expected that, and it is definitely unacceptable. Because, you were expecting a complete culture change. That was part of the reason you went out and got Bill Belichick, was that you were hoping that we were going to get a change when it came to what Carolina looked like in the trenches, what they looked like physically, tackling. I think was certainly something that we thought was going to be better. The fundamentals were something that we thought was going to be there for this group, and it simply hasn't been. And we'll talk even more about that here once we get into the good and the bad and the ugly. But I do think that, there is a lot at this point that you were expecting to see from Bill Belichick that you haven't seen from him just yet. And, the thing that ultimately matters is how much does he care? Is he as driven as we thought he was? We needed a driven coach coming in here. And I just don't know whether or not the losses really bug him the way that we think that they should, the way that it bugs us when we do these podcasts and everything like that. I don't know if that's necessarily there. And that's part of the reason why I was a little bit concerned about the hire of Bill Belichick. I was wondering, was that fire really still there at 73 years old? We thought, from some of the clips that we saw in the spring and then eventually into the fall, that drive was still there and that he was going to be a guy that would show that pretty consistently. We have not seen that here in the first few weeks of the season, and it needs to change here starting with this week. And you're right. I think that Clemson game really determines the direction of the season. You don't even have to necessarily win the game, especially with the talent that Clemson has, but you got to show a little bit more drive than we've seen in the first 2 games of the season, and hopefully we will be able to see that. All right, let's get to the good, the bad, and the ugly of the first 4 games of the season. We'll start with the good. We'll highlight some of the guys that have been performing well. And I will tell you right now, there is not a part of the coaching staff that is on this. Now, if there was, I would say that Natro Means would be a guy that you could look at and say, probably part of the good, considering what the running backs have looked like. They haven't had a lot of space, but I think for the most part, that's an area of the team that's been pretty successful. The first guy that I listed under the good was Damon June. I think he has really found a role in this offense this season. Remember that he did not play in the opener for Carolina, so his production is really over 3 games, 33 carries, 250 yards, and a touchdown, 5 catches for 27 yards. But he is averaging 7.6 yards per attempt, which is a very, very healthy yards per attempt for him. So, I mean, I think this dude is living up to expectations or really exceeding expectations from what we had for him coming into the season, where we thought he could be a part of the rotation for Carolina at the running back spot. I don't think anybody thought that he was going to be what he has been for Carolina, which is running back one, and a very successful one at that in the 3 games that he's played.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy that entered, I think, 5th on the depth chart when fall camp opened up, but has emerged as Carolina's best, most consistent offensive player when Freddie Kitchens utilizes him the way that he should be utilized. Because you mentioned the production was over 3 games. I mean, if we're really being honest, it was over 2, because he was not utilized the way he should have been against Central Florida, where he should have touched the football 20 to 25 times after what he had done against Charlotte and against Richmond the 2 weeks prior. But he's been a lot of fun to watch. He's been very entertaining to watch. I compared him earlier this year to like a throwback of a combination of Ryan Houston and Anthony Elzey, 2 guys that were a part of the program when I first fell in love with Carolina football back when Butch Davis was leading the program. And he gives you a reason to want to watch every Saturday, because you want to see just how good can he get during the season, how much can he grow and develop. And if Bill Belichick's here for the long haul or not, he could be the future of Carolina's running back room and the future of Carolina's offense. So he's been the best story bar none of the first month of the regular season, and cannot wait to see what he does the last 8 games of the regular season, because I do think the sky is the limit, and he could put his name in the conversation as the next great running back of this university. And you don't say that lightly with some of the backs they've produced here in recent memory, with Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Marion Hampton, and others.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the history for Carolina at the running back spot, and they really are one of the more underrated running back universities in the entire country. I think he's a guy that really, if you're looking for this team to make a bowl game this year, this is the guy that's going to be able to carry you there. Now, you need better quarterback play, and we'll talk about the quarterback spot here later on when we talk about the bad and the ugly. But I definitely think that with Damon June, you feel confident that he is one of those pieces that's going to be a part of what you're doing moving forward with Bill Belichick, or if it is someone else at the end of the season and Bill Belichick is moving on, like some people fear could end up happening. I really do think that he is one of those shining lights. Every time he touches the football, it seems like something good happens. Even with some poor blocking, it seems like he's a guy that, with the way that he runs, is going to be successful, very similar to what we saw from Amari and Hampton. So you're hoping that this is going to be able to continue for him. But again, the expectations for him have to be tampered just a little bit, because I mean, the thing is that he is a true freshman. So you're going to have moments during this season where he might struggle a little bit. Still, he is one of those reasons to tune in and watch each week. I think it's very similar to Michael Carter back in 2017 when he first got to Carolina, where the team was not necessarily good, but you had a running back that had so much potential that you just had to tune in and watch each and every week. The other guy that I put in here from the offensive side of the ball, and many people will probably, get up in arms about this, but a guy that I think has really played pretty well in the first 4 games of the season is Jordan Shipp. I think he's a guy that, with this offense, even as limited as it's been, he's got 13 catches, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns, is averaging 14.9 yards per reception. That's a really good number for a guy that is expected to be a big part of what Carolina does. And I think he's really going to be able to succeed here during this next stretch for Carolina if they end up rolling with Max Johnson. It looks like Max Johnson is going to be the guy against Clemson, but we're not sure if he's going to be the guy moving forward after that. But I think this is one of those guys that you can count on in the receiving game. It's just about the quarterback being able to get him the football, because once you do, he is a special player in terms of the ability to bring the ball down and in terms of what he can do after the catch as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that if Carolina had the quarterback play they had prior to last year, if he had Sam Howell, he had Drake May slinging him the rock, he'd be an all ACC caliber wide receiver. That's how good he is. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Carolina fan or that I predicted him to be a breakout player or that I text with his dad on the text line at work. He's just that damn good. And hopefully during this reevaluation period, Freddie Kitchens is figuring out ways to get him even more involved in the offense, because he's your home run threat. He's the most explosive playmaker on your offense outside of Damon June. And so, I'm not surprised by what he's done because I believe in that production. I would just like to see it increased, man, because I think he's special. And I think he's right there with Damon June. Another reason why you want to watch this team the rest of the way every Saturday, because he's the future of the program. And he could be the next great wide receiver that this program is able to produce. And he's been a lot of fun to watch. And I cannot wait to see what the second half of the season has in store with him, because if he gets Max Johnson for the final 8 games, I think he can still put up the type of numbers we thought he could put up back in the preseason.
Yeah, I think he certainly could. I'm looking more towards that 500-600 receiving yard area. And again, you go back to a guy that was really successful here for Carolina back during the 2018 season, Anthony Ratliff-Williams. That was the type of production that he put up when he wasn't necessarily getting the best quarterback play. I think that now, with Max Johnson, you can probably get to at least Nathan Elliott level of quarterback play, where currently with what we saw in the first 4 games of the season, I don't even know if you were there. I certainly don't think you were at where you were last year with Jacoby Criswell. The biggest thing with Criswell was down the stretch. He had some games where he didn't produce, but in the middle of the season, he was putting up some pretty productive numbers, was at least able to move Carolina's offense consistently. We have not seen that, and that's the reason why the receivers have been as quiet as they have been. I know that some of those guys aren't necessarily creating as much separation as they probably needed to for Gio Lopez, but I do think they're creating enough separation to be able to get them the football. We saw it in the game against TCU when Max Johnson entered the game. I thought you saw it a little bit in the game against Central Florida as well once Johnson entered the game. I think we're going to learn a lot more about this wide receiving core when they take on Clemson. But I think that Jordan Shipp is certainly a guy that is doing everything that he needs to do. It's just that he hasn't been able to get the football from his quarterback. But I definitely think that he is a bright spot on this offense and should only be able to increase his production as the season goes along. Then you got Thaddeus Dixon. That's the guy that I think defensively has really shown up so far this season. There haven't been many guys on that side of the ball that have flashed, especially when you have had, or when we have been in these games against these major conference opponents. But Thad Dixon is certainly a guy that has shown up for Carolina. I think he is everything that we thought he was going to be on that defensive side of the ball. You look, his weakest game in coverage was this past week against Central Florida. He allowed 2 catches for 35 yards. That was the worst performance that we've seen from him so far this year. But you go back to that season opener against Eric McAllister, one of the best wide receivers in the country, a guy who just had a 250-yard receiving game this past weekend against SMU. He held him to just 20 yards receiving and was locking him down the entire night. Charlotte didn't allow a pass to be caught. And then in the game against Richmond, allowed just 1 of 2 targets to be caught for 9 yards. He is off to a fantastic start to the year and is certainly the addition that Carolina was hoping they were going to get when they got him in the transfer portal.
Yeah, he's been 1 of 1. And, they've got the Rude Boys moniker for the secondary. No, it's just Rude Boy, and he's the only one that plays with any sort of attitude, any sort of pissed offness. And has shown visible frustration in both of Carolina's losses, something that that I'm going to be able to get behind, celebrate, and champion. He's been everything and more that we were told he was going to be, what we already knew he was because of how much college football we watch, and we saw him play quite a bit for Washington before getting over here. The guy that you heard him say he was going to be when you heard him get behind the microphone. He's been that. He's done his job. It's the other guys in the front seven and the guy across the field that haven't done their job nowhere near quite as frequently as he has. If we had 11 Thaddeus Dixons, I don't know if Carolina would be 4-0, but they'd be a lot more competitive than what they've been so far this season against Power 4 competition. So, he is, Kamori House and some of the other guys have been, Simpson have been fun at times to watch defensively. He's the one guy that I have enjoyed watching every Saturday so far this season because he's in the right position. He's making the plays that we need him to make, and he at least gives this defense a chance to be somewhat competitive.
Yeah, the thing with House and Simpson is that we've seen 2 games where Carolina just doesn't seem to be playing the right run fits. They don't seem to be doing the things that they need to do to slow down the opposing rushing attack, and guys just seem to be out of place. The communication does not seem to be great at the linebacker spot. You don't see that with Thaddeus Dixon. You see a consistent player that has shown up in every game for Carolina so far this year, and you're hoping that's going to continue to be the case as the season goes along. For him, the start that he's off to, this has to have him on some NFL radars. Now, we know that it won't be the Patriots radar because they're not allowed at the facility, but he is certainly a guy that I think is going to be talked about in some of those NFL realms. I just really hope that the success or lack thereof from the team overall doesn't end up holding him back because he is doing some special things for Carolina, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. He is going to get tested. Don't worry about that. That's coming up here once they get into conference play, but I think he's one of those guys that you can rely on, and one of the reasons, if you do believe at all in this Carolina defense, that they're going to improve throughout the season, this is one of the reasons why you should believe they still have a chance to be a good defense. All right, now let's get to the bad for Carolina. And this is where, again, I know the jokes are going to pile in here. How did you pick out 3 things for the bad, 3 things for the ugly? Because there's so many different things that you could have put on this list. The first thing that I have here is Bill Belichick. I think that this is fair to have him on this list because I think that so far – this is not at all what we expected from him. I think one thing that we thought we were going to see was that this team was definitely going to be well coached in terms of the fundamentals, and that this team would be coached in the way that they needed to be in terms of clock management and everything like that. You go back to last week against Central Florida, and you look at how Carolina in that game needed to play with some urgency. We've talked about how they needed to play with some urgency really the entire season. And Carolina just wasn't really moving that quickly on the offensive side of the ball. They were waiting to snap the ball with about 5 seconds on the play clock. I think this is definitely an area that Carolina, they need their head coach to be better, man. We thought, one of the things that we would see as well, was this would be a team that would adjust at halftime. If they were struggling in a first half, they would be able to rally in the second half. It would be much different. We have now seen 2 games against power conference opponents, and there haven't seemed to be the adjustments that we thought an NFL head coach would be able to make for Carolina. So I'm pretty disappointed in what we've seen out of the gate for Bill Belichick, not to mention what we talked about earlier, the care factor from him. I have to put him on this list, and he's got to be a part of the bad.
Yeah, the only good thing that he's brought to us so far is some great gear on the sidelines that I can't wait for them to put online so I can buy it because he's been piss poor. I'm just going to be brutally blunt with you. He's been a downgrade from in-game coaching, management, whatever, preparation from where we were under Mack Brown, man. And that was the thing that, kind of got Mack Brown ran out of town was how many times his team showed up uninspired, unprepared, lack of adjustments. And not being able to maximize the talent. He doesn't have the talent that Mack Brown had, but we thought he'd make up for it by having his team ready to go and be able to make adjustments on the fly in the game as they happen. That hasn't happened. Not at least that's been visible to my eye. And I've been in the stadium for 2 games and watched all 4 games in totality, and it's kind of just been more of the same. Now, maybe the learning process and the adaptation to the college game is a little bit more than we want to believe, and what we were led to believe it was going to be for him. And maybe this week he'll come back with a greater sense and feel for the college game, and Carolina will look better on the football field against Clemson. I don't know, though. It's going to be to be determined. We kind of got to wait and see, but it's fair to be critical of him because expectations were high when you hired a guy that's got 6 Super Bowl titles as a head coach, 2 more as a defensive coordinator, and his team in a lot of ways has looked worse than what we've seen in the last handful of years.
Yeah, I mean, they look worse offensively than they did under Mac Brown. It's not even close. And defensively, you could argue they look worse. You look at the big plays that they let up against TCU. You look at the lack of fundamentals, the lack of tackling. Those were things that, we didn't see in certain times under Mac Brown, but it wasn't every game. And it feels like with this team, it feels like just about every game that Carolina's played outside of the 2 games against lesser competition, 2 games that matter, Carolina has not looked well coached at all. And he has been outcoached by guys that we thought he was going to be able to outcoach. We thought that was going to be the advantage that Carolina was going to have, that with a guy that runs his team like an NFL team, that this team would be so well coached that it would allow them to compete in games and potentially win games. I think Greg Ward brings it up. The only thing that has changed for the better really is our penalties have been down. That's it. Yeah. I will tell you right now that if you told me that is the only thing that gets better and everything else is worse, I would tell you I will continue to take penalties at a ridiculous rate if that means that we have an offense and we have some semblance of a defense. To me, it is unbelievable that we are at this point as Tar Heel fans. It's tough to stomach that right now. But, hopefully that's something that changes as the season goes along. Hopefully, as you said, it really is just that it took time. And eventually Carolina will be able to say at the end of the season that, hey, Bill Belichick took a little bit of time to ease into things. But as the season went along, you started to see why Carolina brought him here, the difference that he brings as an NFL coach. And, we got to start seeing some of the reasons why this guy is the GOAT. Because right now he looks like a guy that is a GOAT, not necessarily the GOAT on the sidelines as a head coach. And, I think at some point he's going to turn into a guy that's going to be looked at as the reason why Carolina is as bad as they are, not just the players on this team. You go to the other portion of the bad. I think one of those is the pass rush. Carolina has not been good here. And you could say, why is this not in the ugly? Well, it certainly could have been. But again, we're picking 3 for each category. I think this is probably in the bad category just because we have seen a small semblance of a pass rush that has shown up at certain times for Carolina, mainly coming from a guy in Milcart Abujade, who is coming up from Delaware. It's going to take him a little bit of time to adjust to this level. I think that certainly is something that you have to factor in. But outside of him, there really is nobody else that has been able to step up for Carolina. And don't get it wrong. Not having Price Yates is a big part of it. I do think that that's something that you're hoping is going to get better as the season goes along. But right now, the pressure numbers are incredibly poor for Carolina. Just 52 total pressures over the course of the first 4 games of the season. That was certainly something that we thought was going to be better. But the more shocking thing is they have just 5 sacks so far this season, and the majority of those sacks came in the game against Richmond. That was where Carolina was able to really produce a lot of pressure, was against them, and in the game against Charlotte, even though to me there wasn't a ton of pressure in those games. It was more sporadic. It really spread out, not consistent from Carolina. We thought there was going to be a drop off maybe in this area without Price Yates being there. but this is part of the reason why Carolina's pass defense has been as poor as it's been so far.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a power 4 defensive line. It doesn't look like a defensive line that can win one-on-one battles against power 4 competition. That's unacceptable. We've talked about it. I've talked a lot about it. What it's done is it's forced Steven Belichick to have to kind of scheme pressure up. But when you've got the question marks on the back end that you do, he doesn't want to put guys in one-on-one situations, which just leaves Carolina's defense once again compromised. So, Bryce Yates was a big addition, but it should not be his absence should not be this glaring. We've harkened back to it and we've referenced it plenty of times. This is why we told you when Bo Atkinson left, that was not a good thing. Carolina was not better off without him, even though he might be a backup role player right now for Ohio State. He would have been a starter and every down player for Carolina this upcoming year. And I think the reason why you could make the argument for this to be the ugly, this is not going to improve as the season moves along. This is what Carolina is defensively up front. There's not going to be improvement. Which really,
well, if you get Bryce Yates back, I do think that this element of it is going to be better.
Yeah, but I mean, because everyone will know he's the only threat, they'll just double team him. And who else on that defensive line is going to win one-on-one battles?
I mean, it's true. He's going to have to fight through some double teams, but I'm hoping that he's going to be able to do a better job of that than Smith Vilbert is going to be able to win one-on-one matchups.
So I think this will be the area defensively where you'll see them big boy up in the portal and they'll try to go bring in dudes up front because they just don't have dudes, man. You got to have dudes at the college level. You got to have guys that can just, shed blocks, get through double teams. You can, I believe at the NFL level, you can scheme around not having a dominant defensive line. At college, I don't think you can. You've got to either you got the guys or you don't. Carolina doesn't have those guys right now, and that's unfortunate. I think that'll be something that will be addressed this upcoming offseason, but this is an area where I don't have a lot of hope that there'll be improvement as the season moves forward.
Yeah, I mean, especially, the interior, there's nobody that you're getting back there. Everybody's playing. This is the group that you have. And in terms of scheming up pressure, even when they've tried to do that, you look at, Kamori House, 5 pressures on the season. Andrew Simpson, just 2, and they've rushed him a pretty decent amount of times. I mean, he's been in pass rush situations 29 snaps out of the 217 that he's played so far this year. So they have schemed up pressure at times, but you're just not seeing those consistent guys. And the rotation there, that's the thing too, is that, when Milcart Abujade is in the game, there's times where he's able to get a little bit of pressure on the quarterback. Even that hasn't necessarily been as consistent as you would want. But then when you take him out, the drop-off is pretty severe to guys like Tyler Thompson, who has just 4 pressures so far this year. We talked about Smith Vilbert being a guy that hasn't necessarily played that well. And same thing with a guy like Joseph McCoy, who has gotten some opportunities there, but grades out as one of the lowest rated guys on the entire team and has just 3 quarterback pressures. I don't see how that gets much better unless you get Bryce Yates back. And even as you brought up, once you get Bryce Yates back, they're going to know all they got to do is double him, and there will be a way to shut this down. The other thing that I listed under the bad is offensive line play, because I do think that, pass protection-wise, they haven't really been as bad as a lot of people have said. I think a lot of people think that, the biggest issue that they have is the snapping from center Chad Lindbergh. That's a thing that's gotten a little bit better as the season's gone along. If they do end up sticking with him, I do think it will continue to get better. And you look at some of the other guys in terms of pass protection. I mean, they really have done a pretty solid job. I mean, they've allowed just 22 total pressures through the first 4 games of the season, just 2 sacks so far allowed by the offensive line. And look, people might say, well, hey, if you go and look at the times that Gio Lopez has been sacked, it's more. There are some that are blamed on the quarterback, where the quarterback simply makes a mistake. I think that needs to be taken into account when it comes to this offensive line. But the one thing I will not excuse them on is how they have run blocked so far this year. They have been incredibly poor in run blocking situations. It's something they simply have to be better at as the year goes along, or else this team is not going to be able to be successful. I mean, there is one guy on the team right now, or two guys on the team that play a significant amount of snaps that are even rated in the 60s in terms of run blocking. Ja'Kai Moore also slides in there at a 61.4, but Chad Lindbergh, 66.5, and William Boone at a 67.2. I mean, 67.2 is the best amongst all offensive linemen in terms of a grade when it comes to run blocking. That simply has to get better as the season goes along if Carolina is going to have success running the football. I mean, look, Damon June can run through a lot of guys, but man, I think this offensive line must be better in that area if Carolina is going to succeed.
Yeah, because it's just so important for, I think, the way this offense is structured. If because you don't play a lot of outside of the pocket in the pass game, you need to be better, or you got to be good in that area. But when it comes to run blocking, like as good as Damon June has been, a lot of it is he's creating on his own. It's him running through tackles. Which is a nice element to have in your run game. There's something to be said about being able to make guys miss. But imagine what he could do if he could get to the second level before he's getting touched, or at least
look at Richmond.
Yeah. So what's really, I guess, odd or surprising is how much stock you put into this is up to you. But this was the highest rated unit that Phil Steele had back in his preseason magazine on both sides of the football for Carolina. So, like, he really bought into what Bill Belichick and what Michael Lombardi did, revamping this offensive line. And we haven't seen that offensive line on the field just yet. Now, some of it is injuries have played a part in that. And as they get healthier, I do think that you will see marketed improvement in that area, but you still should have been able to move some guys up front a lot more easily than what you have in the run game. And you haven't been able to do so. You just had backs that have been able to really run through blockers, run through tacklers, and maximize their runs. And then, when you look at the pass blocking, yeah, some of it is just Gio just has no sense of a feel for a pocket, to where some of those sacks they're his fault because he's not seeing the field. He's not anticipating throws. I do think we'll feel a lot better about pass pro, assuming that Max Johnson is a starting quarterback moving forward, because he just has a greater sense of awareness inside the pocket. So I do think if Carolina can get better protection, or not better protection, but do a much better job of moving people in the run game, this offense, as conservative as it's been and as slow-paced as it's been, could be more productive and efficient than it's been the first third of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that does concern me a little bit is that we saw there was some pressure on the quarterback in the game against Central Florida. I thought as the game wore along with Max Johnson in there, this group started to allow more pressure, and you're not going to have a guy that's nearly as mobile back there with Max Johnson as what you have with Gio Lopez, although we saw with Gio Lopez didn't really matter at certain times. I think that they need to really make sure that they are taking care of business the way that they were early in the season, and make sure that, that game against Central Florida, they don't allow nearly as much pressure. But from that area, I'm not as worried. That run blocking is really the area they got to be better, because so far this season, Carolina's run for 491 yards. 352 of those have come after contact. So that shows you that a lot of this is being put on the running backs to simply run through guys. That's not a sustainable thing. That's not going to lead to a lot of success. And it's why, Carolina, Damon June has had success running the football because he's a monster when it comes to running through guys. The other guys on this roster, they haven't had nearly as much success rushing the football, and you wonder why Carolina has that drop-off at running back. That's the reason why, is because they're not getting the blocking that they need to. All right, now let's get to the ugly. And when you get to the ugly, it really starts with Freddie Kitchens. I think that is the ugliest thing maybe about this entire team right now is Freddie Kitchens as the offensive coordinator. The numbers are really just, I'm not going to say unbelievable because they're real, but the numbers are just disgusting. Where Carolina is at as a passing offense, where they're at as a total offense. Everything about this offense so far this season has looked terrible for the most part, especially in in 3 games. I mean, you go back to the game against Charlotte where Carolina wins the game, just a poor offensive performance overall, only scoring 20 points against that Charlotte defense, which has been torched by every other opponent that they have played. Just shows you that Carolina's offense is not anywhere near as efficient as they need to be. They're not a good team at converting on third down. A lot of that is that they get into a lot of third and long situations because they can't run the ball. They can't pass the ball on some of those early downs. But I think part of that is that they do not have they have a play caller that really isn't all that original in what he's doing, a very vanilla type offense that he's running, very predictable offense that he's running. I mean, we've seen so many people have pointed out Carolina, when they have an obvious running down, Jordan Owens is in the game, which pretty much signals to the opposing defense that they are probably going to be running the football, or it's going to be some sort of play action with a throw close to the line of scrimmage. If you got Jake Johnson in the game, that means you're probably going to throw the ball. It just feels like this offense has been very predictable, very vanilla out of the gate, and it doesn't feel like he's done a good job of adjusting to his starting quarterback either, which I think has really hurt Carolina.
Yeah, he's not put his best players in position to make plays on a routine basis. And Carolina isn't explosive and dynamic enough to put up the type of points they got to put up because they haven't taken that step forward defensively. It's a basic, unimaginative offense that's easy to fill out, easy to scheme against, and really easy to take away Carolina's best players. If Bill Belichick were to have made a move, I wouldn't have argued against it. I would not have deemed it an overreaction. I think it would have been a justified decision because Carolina has better offensive talent than what their numbers suggest they've put up through the first 4 games. And every fear we had when Freddie Kitchens was retained as the offensive coordinator has come to fruition. And it took a month. So, this is going to be a decision and a coaching move that if Bill Belichick is serious and is committed to doing what's best for this program, maybe you keep Freddie Kitchens around because of continuity. But when the season comes to an end against NC State, you give him his pink slip once that game is final, and you go find you a difference maker at the offensive coordinator spot because Carolina has certainly regressed in play caller. And I don't think we'd say that after some of the issues we dealt with both Phil Longo and Chip Lindsey.
Yeah, and look, I mean, with those guys, I think a lot of the issues that we had were in the red zone. I mean, this team can't even reach the red zone. So I think that's a big issue, and it's because this offense is unimaginable or what am I looking for here? It's just unimaginative. It's an offense that is based, and I knew it was going to be like this. I told you this coming into the year. I said, this is going to be an offense that's going to want to resemble a lot of what Michigan does best. They are going to want to run the football at a very high rate, run it very well in between the tackles, and based, off of what they do running the football, that's what they're going to base their passing offense off of. They're going to want to run their passing offense off of their rushing offense. And so far this year, again, yeah, that works when you've got the type of guys that Michigan has in the trenches. This team does not have those types of guys. And I don't know why they can't realize that and make the adjustments that are necessary to be able to run a group out there that is much more competitive offensively. And when you went out and got Gio Lopez, you signed up for a quarterback that ran a lot of stuff out of the shotgun, that ran a more college-style offense. Why would you go out and bring that guy in to run this style of offense. That's what doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So it's a guy that is stubborn, doesn't want to adjust to his quarterback. He talks about, one of the things that we heard from guys in the preseason when they were talking up there was that this was an offense that was going to adjust to the opponent. Well, how about you adjust to the guys on your own roster first? That would probably help you. So I think this is one of those things where, to me, they didn't make the move during this bye week, at least not to our knowledge. I would say if the offense looks that bad again against Clemson and it just seems like he's a guy that's not wanting to change anything, then you have to make the move to Matt Lombardi as your play caller. I think he's a young up-and-coming coach. You look at where he came from last year at Oregon, had success with a left-handed quarterback, a guy that was small at the same time in Dillon Gabriel, and it was a much more imaginative offense. I think that's what you're hoping that you can get from this coordinator spot moving forward. And I just don't know that Freddie Kitchens is the guy that's able to do that. So that would be what I would look at, man. If Matt Lombardi, if you feel like he is ready to take on that type of role, and if Freddie Kitchens' offense looks that bad with Max Johnson in there, then I think you might have to make the move, because that could show you that it's your play caller and not necessarily your quarterback. Now, the other guy that lands on the ugly is Gio Lopez. And I think this is one of those guys that when Carolina went out and got him in the transfer portal, we did not really focus that much on what the fit was going to be like in this offense. And that was on us. We probably should have thought of that a little bit more. But again, we were told that this offense was going to look completely different. This was not going to be like the bowl game. Well, it is exactly like the bowl game offense that we've seen, and it's why Carolina has struggled so badly on that side of the ball. But a big part of it has been that the quarterback has not been able to adjust to the system. And maybe it was just the fact that, he was a guy that came in the summer. But when I watched him play, I just don't think that he is ready for this level. You have seen, again, I've pointed out many times, he's a guy that cannot throw with anticipation. He's a guy that almost looks scared back there at times when he's facing Power 4 competition. And, he's not a guy that, as we said, is under a lot of pressure. So he's seeing ghosts, even though there isn't really anybody that's there. There's not a ton of pressure that's on him the way that we've seen some guys at the NFL level that have dealt with that kind of stuff. We've seen guys at the college level that have dealt with that kind of stuff. He just looks like a guy that is lost out there at times. And I think you said it best during the Richmond game. He's a guy that makes everything look more difficult than it has to be when he's out there. So, I mean, yeah, Carolina's got to, strongly consider rolling with Max Johnson the rest of the way. As we said, according to Inside Carolina, Max has been taking the majority of the snaps for Carolina at the quarterback spot. With Gio Lopez currently sidelined, he has not practiced since the injury. I think that unless things drastically change from what you're seeing in practice, and all of a sudden he is a much more confident quarterback, a much more accurate quarterback, I think you will hopefully have seen the last of Gio Lopez here for Carolina in this offense.
Yeah, in the NIL world, he is the worst investment Carolina has made in football or basketball. And that's pretty damning, because they paid Cade Tyson a lot of money to play basketball a year ago, and he's been worse. And like Cade Tyson, it's not going to get better. He cannot play at this level. And he could sit the rest of the year and get ready for next year. He's not a Power 4 conference quarterback. Not at the level that Carolina wants to play at. Not with where Carolina is trying to get to. He's not that type of quarterback. He's not going to elevate the program where the program needs to be elevated at that position. And I think it'd be best if Carolina would cut its losses, roll with Max Johnson until you have nothing left to play for, and start evaluating and seeing what you got in Bryce Baker for the future, because you recruited him to be the future of your program anyway. He has been as disappointing a player as I think I have watched in the last handful of years watching this program, because there was so much hope and promise that he was going to translate and that his game would translate. And maybe it is, we can look at Freddie Kitchens and say he's the biggest reason why. but some of his issues lead me to believe that it's more than just Freddie Kitchens. It's a player issue as well. So I hate saying that about him because I think he's a good kid, and I hate to kind of kick him while he's down after getting hurt last week. But I don't see a scenario where this ends well. And if I'm Bill Belichick, if I'm Michael Lombardi, I'm looking to try to find a way out of that contract I gave him, because it's proven to be the worst investment they've made since they got put in charge.
Yeah, I think you are 100% right. He is a great kid. Met him at ACC Media Days, and that was one of the first things that I came away with. But he is just not a fit for what Carolina wants to do. This offense, I don't think, is going to change under Freddie Kitchens. And unless you are making a change at the coordinator spot, and even then, I just don't know if he can play at this level. I don't think the talent is necessarily there. Unless things drastically change, he's not a guy that is all that accurate downfield. I think he's a guy that is, certainly, someone that can win if you can throw the ball close to the line of scrimmage. I mean, 40% of his passes have been at or behind the line of scrimmage. That is an area that he can succeed in, but that's not the recipe for success for an offense at the college or pro level. Maybe at the high school level, you can get away with that. Maybe even at the group of 5 level, you can survive with a quarterback that doesn't necessarily win downfield. I thought that, when we watched him last year, that there were some times where he was able to get the ball downfield, but you watch him this year at Carolina, and even some of the throws that he's made and completed downfield, it's looked very difficult for him to get the ball down there. And again, if you can't throw with anticipation, you are not going to succeed at this level. Guys are not going to be open at the level that they were at the group of 5 level. You need to be able to throw guys open, and he simply cannot do that. I think that's part of the reason why Carolina's got to move on and look at Max Johnson, as you said. At this point, I think the biggest reason why you roll with Max Johnson is he gives you a chance to evaluate the rest of your roster on the offensive side of the ball. You need to be able to do that for right now. And then eventually, if things do get bad enough, then you can either roll with Bryce Baker or with Arturi Newkirk, whichever one you actually think is the future of the program, and just go from there. So I think we should have seen the last of Gio in a Tar Heel uniform, at least for this season. Maybe you keep him in the program because you sign him to a 2-year deal. You see whether or not he can adjust to your offense, or potentially you bring in a new play caller next offseason and hope that he adjusts to that new offense. But I just don't feel confident in him being a power 4 player. And guess what? That's okay, man. Not all these guys are built for that. I think this was a situation where Carolina panicked after the spring, after what we saw in the spring. They knew that Bryce Baker wasn't necessarily ready. I think they knew that Ryan Brown was probably going to end up going back to Purdue. Maybe he wasn't necessarily ready to run it. And they said, let's go out and get the most talented guy that we can get at the position. They looked around. There weren't many options out there. It was either him or Nico Iamaleava. The thing with Iamaleava was that he came with a much higher price tag probably to go to Carolina. And so they just said, we're going to roll with Gio Lopez, and it hasn't necessarily worked out. The last thing that I put in the ugly here to close out this edition of the podcast is the tackling and the fundamentals. And again, this is the thing that we thought was going to get better under Bill Belichick. But I will tell you, the first 2 games for Carolina on the defensive side of the ball, the tackling is as poor as I have ever seen it here at Carolina. I mean, 19 missed tackles in that game against TCU. I know they said 9 in the game against Central Florida. I still find that hard to believe. I believe that there were more that just did not, get picked up by Pro Football Focus. It certainly looked like that was a thing that Carolina, they looked just as bad, if not worse, than Mac Brown's teams looked. And if you told me that these were things that Carolina was doing back in the spring, they were tackling more during the fall, I would have told you that you were lying. And that this team has been doing the exact same things that they were doing in the years before. In order for Carolina to get better this season, I think this has to improve. This is probably the thing on the ugly list that I think has the best chance to improve, but I really don't know how much it can improve throughout the year with the talent that deficiency that Carolina has on that defensive side of the ball?
Well, it comes back to some of the issues we've talked about for so long. I think you look at the missed tackles against Central Florida, against TCU. Carolina was in position to make plays, didn't make them. And that's frustrating, where you'd almost rather not be in position to make plays, and you're just having busted coverage after busted coverage. But that hasn't been the case because they're keeping everything in front of them. That's the whole point of this defense, is to keep everything in front of them, rally to the football, and eliminate explosive plays. But that's not happening. They're keeping things in front of them, but then they're not making the tackles that they need to make, and these, short to intermediate, passes become big plays, or what should be 2-3 yard runs turn into 30, 40-yard backbreaking runs that open up football games. And so they've done it against Group of Five or FCS competition, but it hasn't been the same case against Power 4 competition. So there's a lack of consistency there that hopefully they can get ironed out this week, because that's the one thing I thought we would take for granted, that we knew we'd at least be fundamentally sound, be a better tackling football team, do those things that we kind of complained about all those years under Mack Brown and Larry Fedora, and through 4 games that has not translated. Maybe that's still a part of them building this thing up, instilling their culture and the techniques that they want these guys to perform. I don't know. But considering how physical they claimed camp to be, you would have thought they would have been much more accelerated than what they've been so far. Again, I think once you get the horses that you need to have up front, maybe this all looks a little bit better than it looks right now. But you're still talking about guys really outside of Thad Dixon that you're counting on to be big time players that haven't made the type of plays you expected them to make here in the early part of the season. But maybe this is where that early bye can kind of help them, and they can really show some growth and development in that area against Clemson going into the back half of the regular season. Because if not, if they continue to miss tackles at the way that they've missed tackles against Power 4 competition, with how compromised and limited you are offensively, it really makes it hard to envision a path for this team getting to a bowl game.
Yeah. I think that is 100% right, and this defense has to improve if they're going to be able to get there. You're hoping that this week that they have had off has allowed them to tackle a little bit more in practice and really get some of those fundamentals down, some of those run fits that they've really been struggling with. Hopefully they've found a way to communicate a little bit better, make sure that they're doing the things that they need to do moving forward, because Carolina has to improve on that defensive side of the ball if they're going to be able to succeed, because I just don't know how great this offense can be. Even with Max Johnson in there, you want to throw any of the other quarterbacks in there, I think they're limited by their play caller. And even, if they do end up shifting play callers, like I said, I don't know how much different this offense actually ends up looking. You're counting on this defense to be able to win more, and the offense has to help them out. But some of those fundamental things you've got to simply be able to do if Carolina is going to improve. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast, guys. Make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. You can read a little bit more about those 3 guys that left the program. We have articles up there about each one of those guys. Again, wide receiver Isaiah Johnson, offensive tackle Travion Green, and then wide receiver Paul Billups, all have left the program. That is believed to be, for Paul Billups, potentially a medical retirement, while the other 2 guys look like they're just going to try to play somewhere else down the line for Carolina. So, those articles are up there. Make sure that you check those out for us. And then also keep an eye on the website. We will be having some basketball content that, of course, will be coming out for you guys as we get closer and closer to the start of the season. Don't want to miss any of that stuff, including we'll keep you up to date on what is going on with the Luka Bogovac situation as he continues to try to get cleared by the NCAA. So make sure you check that out. Also, head over to the social media pages at Heel Tough Blog on Twitter. Check out the Facebook page as well by just searching Heel Tough Blog. Make sure that you give a follow on the Twitter page, turn on those post notifications so that whenever we post something, you guys will be notified immediately. That page only posts our articles and our podcast editions. So that is the best way to get all of our content right into your your timeline. So make sure that you do that. Same thing with Facebook. Make sure you like that page. That will, won't notify you every time that we put a piece of content up, but it will notify you every time that we do go live, and it will put those articles right in your feed. So make sure that you guys are doing that. Biggest thing that we're pushing right now still is that YouTube page. Make sure you head over there, search the Heel Tough Blog on YouTube, and when you get to that page, give us a subscription. We would greatly appreciate that. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.